Hey, composing gloves here, and today it's actually cooler in California today, so I'm kind of excited I'm not sweating in my room. Today we are going to be talking about major scales. This is the part where all your memorization begins to pay off as we memorize new things. Music's just a lot of memorizing it first. Yeah, I know we haven't gotten to like the super creative part yet. It's just sort of the way it starts. So you can make a major scale off of any key. Now we talked about how scales are a set of intervals. There is a basic set. It's called the major scale. And we use this scale to derive all other scales. There's a really easy way to remember how to make one. And there's a more complicated one that's actually, I think, more popular. It's really ironic. So the really easy way is a major scale. So you put down a bass note because you need a bass note to make intervals. So let's say it's a C. A major scale is made from every major interval and every perfect interval up to an octave. And then it just repeats. So it's just another scale. Scales just, once you go to up an octave, it's just a C major scale again and again and again, or you can go down forever. So, hey, that's a pretty interesting deal right here, what we got going on. That's the easiest way to memorize it. It's every major interval and perfect intervals. Like, I don't know why people do this other one, but this one's more popular. I know it. You'll probably learn it from this right now. So it's called whole step, half step, whole step, half step. That's it. So you go up a whole step, you go up another whole step, then you go up a half step. So for example, we are using C. Let me turn no input mode off. C. So a whole step would be half step, that's a whole step. So whole step, half step, whole step, whole step, and then this is a half step. So some people memorize it like that. And you can use that formula on any note. For example, let's do a D major. D, whole step, half step, whole step, half step. So some people learn it like that because they're smaller things. However, since you've memorized intervals and because you have gone through and it's really in your head now, which is why this stuff's so important, you'll be able to go so much faster. Now that you've got that, you can be like, oh yeah, it's just major intervals and then perfect intervals, and that's it. That's why it's called the major scale. And again, all other scales are pretty much you'll be able to think about it if you get a really solid root, and the major scale is where people have just gravitated towards. And so it's like, this is the thing that if you're going to learn a scale, these are the scales you should learn. It's the building blocks for other ones. Okay, so we have a C. So when we're constructing a scale, there's a few things about it. So one of them is, so we have a C and we know we need to get to an octave up. The scale, it's a interval. So when the intervals start repeating, you've completed your scale cycle. So after the octave, it just repeats again from all major and perfect intervals up to the octave, and it repeats again. So we only have to go up to the C above. Now, one of the rules about writing scales is a scale will take every note. So every single line must be used. Well, this is for major scales. For example, in scales, we have these things called degrees. So this would be the first degree, second degree, third, fourth, fifth, and they come from the intervals. And the reason, if you do something like this, well, let's say, it's a D. Couldn't I write, let me select the D. Couldn't I write C double sharp? That's a D natural. That'd be in my scale. The answer is no. Why? Because look at this. 1. So you're on a ratio of 1 and 1. You have no second degree. It's not officially a major scale anymore. It's some other weird thing. It's very academic, but it comes into play later on when we talk about other types of scales. So you can't do that. If you do that, I don't know. If you publish a song with that, the zombie apocalypse, if it happens, it's going to happen to your house first. So don't do that. So we have C to C. Now, we have to use every line. So that is a big deal that we use every line for the major scale. Because people will count their intervals wrong because of what I just told you. They'll think of these weird situations. They mostly come into play when you're doing the half steps. Because what people will do is they'll count intervals and they'll count them going minor second, minor third, major third. And then if they reach the interval, which could be the same note because of inharmonic spellings, it's like they'll get it wrong. That's what I'm trying to say. So you want to count them. So we have 1 and 2. So here's our second degree. What is the major second? And then we put down the major second, which would be a D. And C major. C major has it's only white keys. Very conveniently laid out for us. Now I've ignored something called key signatures. We're going to be introducing this concept after we complete our little thing on, major scales. So you can do this with any scale. So let's say we wanted to let's do A. Whoops. I'm working in treble clef because I'm just the most familiar with treble, but honestly, it doesn't really matter to me. So I don't know why when I select other notes, look at that. It's still on that one. I have to use my keyboard. It's so annoying. I might just pull up Finale at some point and just start using that. But this is free, so I want to use this. So we have A. So we know that we need to fill up every note up to the next A for a major scale. There are pentatonic scales and all sorts of other scales that it doesn't apply for. So let's move this one up to an A. You know what? I'm just going to delete these and we're just going to fill it in because that's going to be faster. So A. And then we need, whoops, that's a C. A. And then we need to fill up this note, and this, which you should now know. You shouldn't have to be going like this note, this note. It'd be A, B, C, D, E, F, G, A. And so there's our A. We've repeated. We are done. Now you'll know I'm using quarter notes just because it's simple. Now, one thing to note about this whole deal is this means that our note will be, because we want to stay in our degree, because we want what degrees 1 through 8, because we use them to talk about later. It's easier to talk about them, and musicians learn these patterns. So if you do it in some other way, it's going to be weird. So in our scale here, the key thing is we're going to manipulate these notes. We're not going to move them from their spot because they have to be second, third, fourth, fifth. And so that's something you need to be aware of. Something that's not, I've never seen really clearly pointed out, but I've never taken like hardcore theory lessons. I'm very self-taught in a lot of ways, but I have taken some academic courses. But every time I've seen even the academic professors do it, I'm sure there are plenty of professors who do it the other way. But they never explain that these degrees are the reason the notes have to stay where they are. They just say, put the notes here, and then they just move on. It's one of the reasons I'm doing some of these tutorials is to fill in that knowledge. So we have these notes here. And what we're going to do now is we're going to make the major scale. So this is an A. Well, we need a major second based off A. So everything's based off our first note. So we have A. What is a major second from A? Let me turn that off. So we have A. And minor second, major second. Oh, it would be a B natural. Guess what? We have a B natural. We're good to go. So now let's go. Okay, from B natural, now we need, oh, this is a third. It's a major scale. So we're going to need a major third. Pretty self-explanatory. So some people do the whole step, half step. That does more damage in the long run. So I don't advocate it. And that's like a musician just trying to learn scales, memorize scales. But even then, this is, I think, easier once you have your intervals memorized. So it's more work in the long run, but more work in the short run, but easier in the long run. So I have A, because then you could translate to modes and all sorts of other scales. So A, minor third, minor second, major second, minor third, major third. Well, we need a C sharp. Now we're ascending, so we're going to do sharps, but there are reasons. Some scales are preferred in flats. I'll talk about that in a little bit. So we have C natural right now. Well, this, we just established that a major third relative to A is C sharp. So we're going to do C sharp. Okay, now we go from C sharp. So let's go. Okay, so we have the third. Let's do the fourth now. I happen to know it's D just because I've memorized my intervals. And when you have memorized, you can just do that. You wouldn't need to do any of this. But I want to do it just to, you know, help you see how this is created. Because you could actually do this really fast. The idea is you can do it instantly. So we have A, minor second, minor third, major third, perfect fourth. So we have a D natural. So here we go. Now we need a fifth. So this is our fourth tritone, perfect fifth. So our E can stay right where it's at. It's the E natural. And then we have F, which I happen to know will be sharp. So we're going to, and the reason I know that's because I memorized these things, but we have perfect fifth, minor sixth. Don't want a minor, not making minor crap, we're making major crap. So minor sixth, major sixth. So we need to raise it a half step. Why is my keyboard not raising it a half step? There we go. So major sixth, minor seventh, major seventh. So our G needs to be raised too. And it has to be a G. It has to be on this line. If it's not on that line, it's wrong. It's some other thing. So that's the thing. And then we have A. So some of you guys might be saying, well, why is that such a big deal? It is a big deal later on when you know theory. Doing this other ways, that's just weird. Like, it's unnecessarily complicated. This right now to you probably seems unnecessarily complicated, but later on, it's much easier to think in these sorts of systems. So that's why they're a thing. This is the scale. So now if we play it, we'll have our major scale sound. So just so you know, well, I guess this is a fun fact. Major scale is also called the Ionian mode. We'll talk about modes later, so sometimes we'll see that. So, okay, that's how you make the major scale out of any scale. Now, there are subscales that you choose to do sharps. And as I talked about before, generally when you are moving up, you're going up, you have a sharp. So we're going from C to C sharp. And then when you're going down, you do flats. But when you're writing scales out, musicians are used to thinking in keys. Instead of thinking this as like when you're going up, it's F sharp, and when you're going down, it's G flat. That's like unnecessarily complicated. We want to avoid that. It's easier if we're going to be moving and using this set of notes. It's easier to just make all G's sharp. So when we go down, it'll be A, G sharp, F sharp, E natural, D natural, C sharp. So we keep our sharps in B natural and A. So we just keep those the same. And then if we ever want to change something, we just change it relative to the key that we're moving in. So if we want like our G to be natural for some reason, we could make it a natural and for that one G, and then all the other G's after it, depending on if it's in the same measure, then those would be natural. And what we like to do is we like to keep the sharps as we're going up. We're thinking in a key. It's easier to think in a key and have the sharps ascending and descending to keep just the same sharps, because it's unnecessarily complicated to think, oh, F sharp and G flat. Like that's like crazy. So we'll keep it the same. And then when we change it, it'll be more intuitive because we'll know we're changing it relative to something. So we'll do that to keep things simpler. Now, some of these keys have flat keys. They went on a party. No, I'm just kidding. The reason they didn't do drugs, what happens is you could do one. So you could do this for every note, right? You could do it for C natural. You could do it for C sharp or D flat. So what makes you choose sharp or flat? If it doesn't matter if we're going up or down, if they're sharp or flat. Now, when you're making changes like chromatic changes and stuff, then it matters, which we'll talk about later. But why would you, when I'm making my harmonic scale, so this is D, E, F, G, those are all just one note. So you can just make G major scale or an E major scale. But what about like D, do I make a C sharp scale or a D flat scale? Or do I make a F sharp scale or a G flat scale? The reason why you would pick a flat over a sharp is because there's less of them. So for example, the B flat major. So it's B flat major by convention because the amount of flats is only 2. I don't know how many sharps it is. I haven't like thought about like that before because I've always just learned it as B flat, but only 2 flats. There's a lot more sharps involved when you do sharps, and it looks really weird on paper because or an A sharp. I'm sorry, it's an A sharp scale. So if you do an A sharp scale, you're gonna have way more sharps. It's like unnecessary how many sharps there are versus flats. And most people it's easier for them to think in the key of C when there are no sharps and flats. So you don't want to stay as close to that as possible. Notational wise, like you don't want to like write things in this crazy method. It's the same tones just being expressed in a much simpler way to understand. So if we were to write this like, whoops, let's just delete this. So let's write a B flat scale. So first, so we know we need a B, and then we'll go C, and then we need to fill in all the other notes. So F, G, A, B. Now I'm assuming you've memorized the intervals, so let's go ahead and make this. So okay, so we have this B over here. This B needs to be flat because we're starting on B flat, and we're gonna go, okay, B flat, what's the major second to B flat? Well, let's look over here, B flat, that'd be C. The major third to B flat, that would be D. Perfect fourth, what would the perfect fourth be? Well, you've memorized them, so it's E flat. That's what it is. And you go F, G, you're like major, perfect fifth, which would be F. And then you do major sixth, and then you need a major seventh. Major seventh, and then you need a perfect octave, which would be another B flat. And you have your B flat major scale. So what you need to do, because you're probably at the point, especially if you're learning this for the first time, and this is not like a refresher course, you need to go through and memorize these. You need to go through and memorize all your intervals. And well, actually what you need to do, here's an assignment. And do this assignment if you're serious. Like there's this whole sort of stigma about doing the least amount of work. Just watch the video. You'll get it then. Like, yeah, right, dude. You need to do some exercises. That's why you're watching it, right? So here's an exercise. On my website, I've got this for download, or you could do it in MuseScore or whatever program you use to notate. Or you could, on my website in the free download section, I have 2 sheet music. I advocate handwriting because then you have to write in your clef and your key signature. in your time signature, we're not dealing with key signatures yet. You're going to write in all your flats and sharps, no accidentals, no use of, I don't know if I defined that yet, but yeah, accidentals are flats, sharps, whenever you have to add something to augment the pitch that it's on. So to raise it or lower it a half step. I can start using these terms now, which is so nice. These things sort of stack up. But on my website, I've got staff paper. I have big staff paper, and then I have the notational, like smaller staff paper for people who like to write small, and then I have the big stuff for you people who like to write big, so that you can really see what you're doing and make it simple. So on my, again, free. So what you need to do is go through each note, and I want you each note starting on C and go up to the C. So there's 12 scales, and I want you to write out all the scales, all the major scales. That's all you got to do, right? And then by the end, you'll have this like half step, whole step thing down. Or again, I don't advocate doing that. You'll have this all major intervals, and you'll learn your intervals so much faster too, because you'll have like another thing to apply them to. And this starts becoming important because now when you write a melody or chords or stuff, you need to know what degrees and what's allowed and what's not allowed. And you'll be able to modulate between keys, which is very interesting sounding in music. It creates interest. So you want to do that. Now, when you get to these notes, these enharmonic spelling notes, and you'll be like, do I write flat or sharp? I want you to do both. Do them both, and then you'll see which one's easier. So you'll get personal experience. You'll be like, oh, freak, no, I'm not writing the A sharp scale anymore. I'm writing B flat because freaking A sharp scale has all those sharps. I don't want to think about that. It's worse for the composer, worse for the performer. It's just worse all around. There's no reason to do that. So just write them in B flat. Now, when you're modulating from keys that already has a lot of sharps, it may occasionally be more intuitive. So there are exceptions. There's exceptions to almost every rule. But anyways, that's how you make major scales. You every major interval and all perfect intervals up to an octave, because after this, it just repeats. Now, if you have like scales with less than 7 notes, excluding the perfect octaves, so there's 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh, there's 8 notes, so there's 7. And then when the intervals repeat, then you know your scale is done. So I've already said that, but I just wanted to bring it up one more time. Have fun making scales. Make these things. They will become building blocks. The major scale is the most important thing to really have solid. Like, you got to know major scales. If you don't know major scales, life is going to suck. So yeah, subscribe and have a blessed day.